everyone, and welcome to the Ad Pace radio show brought to you by the People and Culture Association or the PCA. I'm Jonathan. I'm going to be a host today. And of course, I'm the coordinator for the People and Culture Association, which is a dynamic, vibrant group of people and culture professionals who join us as members. And I will be sharing more details about how you can join us and become a member at the PCA. So look out for that kicker at the bottom of your screen, and it'll give you more information about how you can join the PCA. But you are here today on one of our live radio shows. This is season two. We did a whole season last year where we had some fantastic conversations. And season two is already kicking off with some really, really good conversations again. And we have three amazing speakers who are joining us on today's conversation to talk about leadership and toxic culture and why ignorance is not bliss. The phrase that we have used and heard a lot growing up. All right, so very quick hello to Jeanette Oliver, who is the Director of Transformational Services at the TCM Group. And we are matching because we didn't plan this out, but it seems like we're matching with our tops. Also, big hello to Michaela Smith, who is a conscious leadership coach. And Jeanette and Michaela have just discovered that they are far off neighbors in Dorset. So maybe a weekend meetup is on the cards. And also a final hello to Avril Lehman, who's also joining us today. She's a leadership psychologist at Whitewater Group. And thank you so much, ladies, for joining us on today's conversation.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much for having us. Hi, everyone.
Awesome. So we're going to get straight to it. I think we want to talk about leadership and toxic culture. There's lots being spoken about it. A lot of that is being discussed from a very academic perspective. A lot of perspectives coming in from theory and models, but we want to get down to the actual working of this. How does it really impact? What is the intentions behind people who probably engage in this kind of behavior, and how does it impact those who are victims or survivors of this kind of behavior? I was just mentioning to our speakers today that there was a recent news that has broken out about one of today's pop culture artists, Lizzo, a great singer, songwriter herself, who has been accused of harassment and of course, toxic workplace culture. A couple of months ago, we heard about Kelly Clarkson and her workplace culture, which was once again shot down as a toxic workplace culture. We have recently read about the series of allegations at McDonald's, which once again has been blogged about quite a lot in the press. So I think the question to you all is. And it kind of refers back to what Kelly Clarkson, who's a talk show host in the US, says. She said she was completely shocked about the fact that there was a toxic workplace culture, and she's committed to fixing it. And she responded quickly within 24 hours of that news going into the public, going into press, that she will get down to fixing it because she will never tolerate that kind of workplace culture where she is a leader. And then one of her employees went out to say that Kelly has no clue how unhappy her staff is. Now, the question is that even possible for a leader to be completely blindsided by a workplace culture? I know could business be all on their mind and that they completely have no idea that this is taking place? From your experience of dealing with clients and leaders, what do you feel? Go for it.
Well, I think there's a difference between where you have stars like that, who are particularly protected and quite separate from the business, and they may be able to swan off in ignorance. I think it's different in the corporate world, but the same things apply, that their direct reports, the execs around them, may keep things from them, especially if there's likely to be a catastrophic response. So that people at the most senior levels, it's very easy for them to become distant and inured. It's not right. But I think there is an element of truth there. And everybody who's announced recently, the Fire Brigade, Police Scotland, I think cricket as well, has announced that we would not tolerate, misogyny and bullying and what have you. They all have been for many years. So I think there is a great deal of ignorance and then sudden desire to put it right when it's forcibly brought to their attention.
Yeah, and of course, there was a recent article in the Forbes that talks about why could why is this actually happening? Why are toxic workplaces kind of breeding in the background while leaders are focused on their business? And it could be the fact that they are ignoring what's happening. So is it that they're completely unaware, or they are turning a very conscious blind side to this, Jeanette?
I think possibly a bit of both. And I was kind of thinking as we're talking through this of an example of an organisation that I worked with previously, and I'll keep them anonymous to protect their dignity. But there was, while we were there was some interesting feedback that came through the annual employee survey, and so we did some kind of deep dive investigation into that to kind of really understand what was going on even more, and uncovered bits of, I guess, what probably could be classed as toxic culture traits. And when it was being presented to the executive team, there was one director who was in shock, like, I cannot believe this has been going on my watch, and I cannot believe, I was complete ignorance, like I didn't know this was happening, and I'm ashamed that I've been leading an organization where this is going on, and I was really unaware. And then there was another director in the same room who was like, I'm not shocked at all. I knew this was going on. Like, you just talk to people and I was connected. And it's like, I almost don't know which of those is worse. Like the ignorance of like, how did you not know this was going on? Are you that unconnected to what's going on in your organization or the function that you were leading, or the one that was really well connected and knew but had done nothing with it, had not clearly not raised it with the rest of the executive team. So I think there's that balance in the middle, isn't it? It's like, if you're, it's like the ignorance isn't an excuse, because how could you? And everyone else is going, how could you not know this was going on? Like, how are you that disconnected? But if you are going to really connect with your team and find out, then it's almost, then do something with it. Like, do something, tell someone, rate, change something. You're in a leadership position. If as an executive leader, you don't feel that you're able to tackle these things, then who else is going to?
For me, if I just may jump in there, talking about toxic culture, I think, it is such a broad spectrum of what we could actually talk about in here. And for me, at least how I perceive it and how I feel it, is there are two kind of main categories for me in this. So the toxic culture that is caused by like really sexual harassment, let's say violence, bullying, and really gross misconduct that we're talking about in here. But then there is also toxic culture that is caused by let's say the lack of skills of the leader, or maybe things like micromanaging, things like not being able to create a culture of being vulnerable, expressing emotions, right? So there is a very, very wide spectrum of when we talk about toxicity in the workplace. And I think it's very, very important to understand, if there is a sexual harassment going on in the company, however big, I believe that the leader will know, because if he or she does not know, there is a real serious problem. But if you do have got sub teams in a large organization where maybe the micromanagement, the vulnerability, and so on and so forth, the main head honcho does not necessarily need to know, because you have got so many sub leaders below that. So there is a little bit of a distinction that I think we need to make in here when we talk about what is it actually that we're talking about, what kind of toxicity are we talking about in here. That's how I see that.
I agree with you, and I like the distinction between the two. And I think as well that even where you've got those sub teams where there's kind of almost like let's call it micro toxicity or whatever you want to call it, I think there are still clues for executive leaders to pick up on. Like, most organizations of that size would have an employee satisfaction survey. Quite often you get leadership feedback or management feedback surveys. Even just going around walking the floor and talking to people, you pick up on it. If you're the kind of leader that is going to go and engage in conversation, you will meet people that are brave enough to tell you what's going on, even if those kind of, you get the grumbles. And I think it is difficult to distinguish between what is your kind of everyday grumble and what is there something that I need to look here. But I think if you're really connected to it on a regular basis, you'll start to notice those trends.
But isn't that the problem, that many leaders do not connect, they don't walk the floor? And it's what I find with the leaders that I coach is that often they've been trained in something else, accountancy or engineering, and the amount of training they've actually had, the amount of development they've had in leadership is minuscule. So they're rank amateurs, and they can focus a great deal on the strategy, the results, the shareholders, and they leave that stuff to, well, either a chief of staff, who's usually a woman, or HR will handle that. And so there's that separation, plus the fact that if we talk about culture, it sounds so ephemeral and airy-fairy, but to people living in it, they know if there's a culture of disrespect, and it doesn't need to be the awful things. And I do feel in some of the companies I have dealt with, maybe this awfulness is coming from the top. You know, I've just had a woman who's left a particularly well-known private bank because basically she wouldn't go and take the cocaine on a Friday night, so her face didn't fit. Well, how far up does that go? How well is it known? And how much is it tolerated or pursued? Because they kind of believe it gets better results. So I think there's a real spectrum from complete ignorance to collusion going on.
I think there seems to be a thick line. I think from everything that we're reading around us, there seems to be a thick line, though some people might claim that it is a thin line between what is going on and what is being perceived and what is accepted in certain places and just what is tolerated. I think these are different words, but all trying to say the same thing, right? And thank you for putting in those comments. We have some live comments coming in. If you are joining us live on the At Pace Radio Show on LinkedIn or YouTube, drop your comments, drop your questions, and we'll pick them up for you. A very interesting comment there by Denny. We're going to put that up on the screen. He says you can't read the bottle's label when you're in the bottle. That's a very interesting comment there. But once again, because I think there have been a lot of I would say there is so much being written about this. You know, people talk about why do employees actually tolerate toxic behavior, and you know we're talking about if you can't read. Is it really true that you can't read the label of the bottle once you're in it? Because you know, what could be the possible reasons why leaders actually tolerate toxic behavior? And there's an article that lists out around 6 or 7 of those reasons, and it says the end justifies the means, which basically means business comes first. The seniority of the perpetrators, so the perpetrators themselves are senior leaders in the group. The supervisors are as bad as the perpetrators. That's another reason is put out there. Those who are experiencing it do not matter enough to stop it. That's a very interesting one among the reasons. The leaders themselves are not aware of it. So that is one of the reasons, though it's given like a very popular excuse. It is one of the reasons. And a couple of other ones, which are very interesting to me, are it has not yet reached the shame threshold. So it's not yet reached the threshold where it's causing shame to the perpetrator. And finally, the perceived damage of discovery. The fact that this news, when it does come out, how will it actually impact the company? From your experiences, do you think any of these are true as to why things continue to exist even when we are living in a world today where the modern workplace very clearly knows that this is not the right way to go about things?
If I may, I'll just, again, you know, there are so many angles that we could take this from. But if we let's talk about why, first of all, the employees, you know, why employees maybe do not bring up the things, you know, up to the surface. Let's just be really a bit, you know, conscious leadership coach. I work a lot with people's psyche, the same as, you know, Jeanette and Avril. So we know that as human beings, we are really very much driven by fear. Right. So me coming up and speaking up as a part of the team, if nobody else is there with me, you know, it really is an existential fear for my brain, for my mind, for my subconscious. My subconscious is going like, don't do that. Because if you do that, you're going to be sticking out. You're not going to belong. And really existential need for all of us is to be part of a community, part of something. Right. So there is a huge amount of fear, even though something is going on and I'm really not liking it, but I'm able to tolerate quite a lot. Now, when I come to the leaders part, and let's not go and talk about, let's say, COOs and CEOs, where really the disconnect can be massive, right, from like sub teams. But if I'm a leader and I work with the leaders that are very often really in a time of their career when they really want to understand themselves more. So many of my clients, it's not that they want to create a toxic environment by, let's say, micromanaging or by, let's say, not delegating or by, let's say, not trusting. But I am really much interested in the leader, him or herself, because there is something within them. There is, again, a fear that is leading them to lead in a certain way, because they themselves don't know how to lead in any other way. So what I see among the leaders is really, because I don't want to talk only about the negative stuff, there is a lot of hunger and a lot of desire from the leadership to actually start learning about more, who am I, what drives me, how can I create a better culture. But before I start doing that with others, I actually have to learn how to do it with myself. And so, it's not always that, I have got a bad boss and he is just a bully. Maybe they just don't know how, but they don't know where to ask and how to get that help. And that's why this is where coaching is so important. So if we start from the leaders themselves, it's not only about speaking up, but maybe let's have a look at the root cause, why you are not able to create a culture that thrives, and you are creating a culture that is actually bullying, or that is, based on competition. What is the root cause of that? If that is not what you want to do, okay, let's have a look. How can we help you to start with? Does that make sense?
I
Yeah, I
think
think in Thompson, sorry, Avril. I think Thompson agrees. I just want to highlight the comment. I think it's a kind of a comment that echoes with what Michaela is saying, that it might not be, you might not be actually having a leader in the literal sense of the words in your office. And who is the leader? I think that's what we're trying to get to. And does this leader need to have the adequate training to be in that position to handle this kind of things? So besides the fear of not wanting to address it, even if there is awareness, is the leader capable enough to handle it? I think is another question here. Avril, sorry, I was
no,
yeah.
coming on from Michaela's point, I think one of the things most lacking in many organizations at many levels is the capacity to reflect. And of course, in coaching, that's what we see, people reflecting and really examining their beliefs about leadership, for instance. And for many, many years, we've had beliefs like leaders are born, not made. You know a leader when you spot them, i.e., they went to the same school as you, the same university, the same army, whatever. And so there was a very rigid form of accepted leadership. And as again, Michaela was saying, our beliefs that we have lurking in our brains go back a long way. So deep down, you might believe that leadership of just ordering people around and leaving them to it really works. What concerns me is that I, as a psychologist, I'm often the one looking at the commerciality of what people are doing. And if you want the most competitive firm, the most effective firm, then you want to foster people. And there are very good ways of doing that. Taking the toxicity out is a good start, and labeling people to play to their strengths, not be afraid, to have the freedom to be authentic, all of that adds to the share price. So why shareholders are not pushing people to develop better leadership that fosters greater commitment and retention as well. Because, of course, if an environment is awful, people will leave, and they don't go home and sit and knit. They go to your competitor and they take all the wisdom that you've imparted to them. And you know what? People lie on their exit interviews. Women, especially, never tell the truth. And they'll say things like, why should I give them the benefit of my opinion now they didn't want it? Or why would I block my copybook? So it never gets back to the organization how bad it is. And it's not just women. I've audited organizations where men have said, don't leave us out because, I'm an introverted male. This is not the place where I can thrive. So, but none of that goes back. And in fact, it damages business and your business outcome, not just the well-being of your people.
I think that's a really interesting point, and the bit that I think the bit to add to the discussion as well is fear and or apathy is the reason why people don't take action on things. And I think there is a little bit of that self-preservation, as Michaela was already talking about just now, in that if I step forward and raise this, not only am I putting myself in a vulnerable position, it's also going to take all of my energy, all of my everything. I'm going to have to put everything into almost fighting against the system in order for my voice to be heard. And actually it's just easier and it's better for my own well-being to kind of pick myself up and take myself to the competitor and go do another job. And I think where the apathy comes in is more that I guess there's probably I know something's going on, but right now it's not going to be my priority. I don't want it. I'm not going to. I right now need to focus on my job, on this project, on this priority, and I'm going to ignore that until it gets to the point that it's in the press, or you have a whistleblowing report or a really significant, huge grievance that gets raised, and then it's kind of thrown in your face, and you have to lean into it and deal with it, rather than nipping it in the bud at the more appropriate time.
And the acid test is, will you deal with it? And will you deal with it if it's your rainmaker? You know, your star pupil is the one who's most troublesome. Will you take the risk of losing that person for the sake of the firm? And that's where a lot of people stumble. More junior people, you can deal with them. But that star in the business, will they be brave enough?
Yeah, I think we've all seen the negative consequences of a high attrition rate, of people, of employees not being able to retain their best talent. And sometimes you're right, and sometimes they don't even tell you why they're leaving. Um, the question I think that we are trying to answer today, and we are talking about people and culture at the end of the day, and this is the People and Culture radio show brought to you by the People and Culture Association, and we want to talk about a bit more about that, the breeding of that culture, breeding of that toxic culture, and we're going to spend the rest of this session about how we can fix it. But just to wrap this up about just that, how our leaders maybe, so let's give them the benefit of the doubt here. They are unaware. So we've drawn the line. It's not ignoring, it's ignorance. All right. So I know we're playing the words, but it's very strong. I was just talking to Jeanette about this last week. Ignoring is different from ignorance, and it's almost stemming from the same word there. And so we're giving them the benefit of the doubt that they're not ignoring it, and they're just ignorant about it and unaware of it. What would you say are the top signs for leaders, for good leaders to start to understand that they are kind of sowing the seeds of toxicity in the workplace, maybe even subconsciously or unconsciously, things that they might be doing that is slowly kind of leaving those crumbs behind, uh, for toxicity in the workplace.
I think the point of the comment that was up on the screen just now from Simon around that, when leaders aren't aware because they're not told, and I've coached kind of executive leaders where, and I remember one particular who used the phrase the watermelon reporting, where everyone's telling them that everything's okay and everything's green from a rag status, when actually there's all this red indicator, so they've got ignorance there. But the message that gives out to everyone, as Simon rightly pointed out, is that if leaders are genuinely unaware, they are not going to be taking action, because you're not going to take action on something that you're not aware of. But then that gives the message to the entire organization that this behavior is tolerated. So, and I don't know necessarily what signs you get as a leader. I'd be interested to see from Michaela and Avril's point of view, whether they, from their experience, whether they've seen this. But what signs from a leader how do you know that you're ignorant to stuff? How do you know that you're getting watermelon reporting in your organization? What signs are there of that?
I would say, from my experience, I used to work as a leader 20 plus years in a large corporation before I became the leadership coach. And I know, I think, as Jonathan said, awareness is really such a big thing in here. We keep talking about it. But I think for the leader, individual leader, just to start observing my team. If we just really take it on a micro unit, again, I don't want to go into, I am not the one talking about these huge pictures on a grand scheme, because it's really difficult to fix, the upper level. But where can I start as a leader? Let's say if I just want to assess and look at my leadership style, do I feel that my team is being led in a way that I want them to lead? Do they feel how I want them to feel? If I want them to feel, in a positive way, in a thriving culture, just observing, like, are people speaking up in my meetings? Am I getting questions? Am I listening? Am I actually taking time to actually listen, or am I just giving the directives? And it just comes to my own self-observation. How much am I talking? How much am I listening? We all know that the biggest asset of a leader is how to listen. How often do you work with a leader who is actually really able to sit down and listen without going and advising you all the time what to do? right? So it's really in that my small team, whether I've got 5 people or 15 people, or I don't know what it is, 2 people, are they talking to me? Am I listening? Are they expressing their opinions? And these are really quick signs to let you know, okay, what is actually my style of leading in here?
And you must find this in coaching, that certainly for my coaching, I start with a lot of sort of psychological insights and really helping the person understand how their personality works, where their strengths lie. And the very strengths that get you to these senior positions often mean that you don't listen to people because you're very driven. You kill yourself. You'll work all night. You'll expect the best. And that's not a characteristic that leaves you likely to sit quietly and ask people's opinion unless you truly understand the value of it. So, what gets you there doesn't keep you there or doesn't make you excel. I mean, we're interviewing a lot of CEOs at the moment about their past experience for another book, past experience of coaching, and also asking, what do you need coaching on right now? And these, of course, are so far anyway, pretty brilliant specimens who have got a lot of awareness because actually they have done a lot of coaching. So they know that at each phase of their life, they need different insights. They need somebody holding up the mirror so that they can see what it is they haven't seen, what they haven't done. So people don't know they don't listen because they're so used to managers telling that they've just gone up the way. So they need, and it's only often in that very trusting, confidential space of being with a coach where you've got somebody robust enough to sort of say, whoa, can you see what you did there? And you can begin to look at that and think about change. But people have modeled themselves on who went before, and understanding the drivers in your personality, that's when you need to begin to accommodate what's needed.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there, Michaela, with regards to listening, and Avril, of course, to say that we are in that fast-paced world. Also, to kind of bring this all into context, we have gone to that phase of working all online, where everything was much more, I would say, micromanaged and minutely kind of dissected in terms of you could actually get to know the person a bit more now because you were on screen with them for some time. We moved from that completely in-person setting to online, and now we're in a hybrid space, which I think also makes it kind of gives us. I remember the time when we actually went online, we did not know our proper working hours, and that whole drive to be better got even worse. And there were few people who managed to actually find the right balance in creating that balanced working environment in an online space. So I think, Jeanette, if we could finish the loop on this, I think is about from your side. Do you think that has because we have moved into a hybrid space, has it become easier for leaders to kind of find the right balance in a workplace culture, or has it made it tougher?
It's interesting because a lot of the commentary is that leaders are finding it tougher, and you hear a lot of there's a lot of need when we start doing some of our diagnostic work for leadership programs, is that how do you manage a hybrid team and how do you stay connected? And we're having this conversation in the office the other day, and it's like, it's no different because human connection is still human connection. And in a way, it's easier to connect because you're not waiting for someone in an office, or that, quite often some of the corporate environments I worked in, you've got leaders and you're running from meeting to meeting and they're never at their desk and you never get a hold of them. Whereas, things like digital tools like Teams, you can message, you can say, can I have a chat? And someone can call when they've got 5 minutes. And so I personally think it's, if not as easier to have human connection virtually, because there are more tools, there are more things available to you to connect, to reach out, to message, to have those conversations. And I think, yes, face to face is probably is I think the most impactful way to kind of establish relationships, but online is a good second best. And we're connecting here now, we've not met, you feel like you're my friends already. Maybe I have a strong attachment style, I don't know, but I do think it's easy to have those, connect the team, check in with people. You can have more private conversations as well when you're working from home because you haven't got people listening in. So I personally don't buy into the narrative that it's harder to have connections with people in a hybrid environment.
I think it was difficult when, the whole COVID started, because it was just so new, and it was like everybody was all over the place. But I think now we've settled, and it's okay. Like, we found our ways around that.
But I think that's logical. That's
Absolutely.
all very sensible.
Yeah.
But the leaders we're talking about are often not being that logical, because, if you scratch the surface and ask people about people's motivation, what you find are the deep-seated beliefs are very old. They're from last century. They're not even Maslow. They can talk about Maslow, but they're actually doing Hertzberg or McGregor. They still feel if you're not standing behind people with a big stick, they won't work as well, despite all the logical evidence to the contrary. So we've always, as I think all three of us certainly do, we've always got to challenge people's fundamental and conscious or unconscious beliefs, which, well, people don't really work unless they're in front of me. Utterly untrue, but it is still impacting on people, that it is a preference rather than a logical assumption. But that's driving some of the behavior I see in organizations at the moment about getting people back. It's not about efficiency or effectiveness. It's just about, I'm more comfortable with it.
There's some interesting comments coming in the chat box. I think the one that I really like is about, and I think it's a very relevant one, is about the senior leadership positions being something that's almost like a fleeting position. You have a senior leader in that in an organization having that role for maybe 2 or 3 years, and then he or she has to move on to another role. And then how does a new person come in and take up that position? How does a new person come in and take up that role right there and set that ball rolling? Because everyone else might have been used to what was happening before and got used to the culture that the previous leader had developed. And I know, Jeanette, you have recently joined TCM. It's been half a year now, I guess you've been with us.
6 months.
Yeah, and you came straight in. You took that chair, and you know exactly how to get along with everyone and get started. I'm sure Avril and Michaela, you have your stories as well, where you all got into new workplace cultures and kind of hit the ground running. I think we want to wrap up this conversation by talking about how to fix this. How start moving towards, I would say, the silver lining now. How can we fix this? What do leaders require? How do they require coaching? Do they require training? Do they require improved education? And how much of an influence does their style kind of have? How much of an influence does a leader's leadership style have on toxic workplaces? So I just wanted to kind of throw that across to you and see what comes back.
Well, we did a piece of research a few years ago now, but I think a lot of it still holds fair. And we said, if you were CEO for a day, what would you want in the company? And a lot of things came out, but the two words that we'll throw out there are fairness and courage. They wanted openness about what the rules of the game were in the company. They wanted to see the values demonstrated in people's actual behavior, not just up on the wall as these are our values. And they wanted people to have the courage to have the tricky conversations. Now, for me, a lot of the tricky conversations are always about saying anything good, but there's also there's a great deal of cowardice about giving feedback that you might be uncomfortable giving. So courage and fairness, I think, are two of the things that make for a fabulous work environment if people abide by or live up to those standards.
And I would just, if I may just take from there, to have the courage and be able to express yourself, the psychological safety, right, that needs to be created in the company. And if that really is a value, and I mean really value, not just a tick box situation, as it so often still is, right, then within that space of psychologically safe space, you can just really start taking small steps on creating that culture of connection, of expression, of building the trust. But really, that the leader, whoever the leader is, whether it's on the top, whether it's in those sub-departments, it really needs to come genuinely that I actually genuinely want to do this. And again, this is not just because I want to tick box. Once that culture is introduced and encouraged, Then I would say, and from my own experience, is for each and every single leader within the organization is to take their own responsibility for enhancing that culture, for growing that culture, creating that safety in their individual departments through whatever it means in their departments. But it needs to come to individual leaders' responsibility. So it's not me blaming somebody else, but I am the bloody leader here. Sorry. It is my department, and it's up to me to actually go and take this and make this work. Through the work that I'm doing on myself. So for me, taking responsibility is a huge step for the leaders.
And I totally agree with what you've both said. And the one word that I would add into it as well is curiosity, and be really curious. And it's almost, if you're in a position where you be curious with yourself, like, why am I turning a blind eye to this? Why am I not putting the time or prioritizing leaning into something? Is it because I'm fearful of something, or is it because I've got apathy, or what's going on there? And also be curious. Go back to I really like the analogy of if you're in the bottle, you can't read the label. So if you're in the bottle, be curious about what's on the label. Get yourself out the bottle and read the label. And also then be curious with people in the team, like ask questions, go talk to people. Don't allow yourself to be in a position of ignorance.
Yeah. And one thing I would add in there is that coaching is definitely, because the coach is there to actually help you to read that label. Because if you are in the bottle, that label is actually your blind spot, so you can't see it. And it's not always easy to get out of the bottle and see it, but that's the role of the coach, that I will put the mirror in front of you so that you can see what's actually going on for you, with love and with gentleness and with compassion, but actually also with accountability. So coaching is absolutely crucial today.
Yes, I thought we were all being a bit polite and not wanting to sell, but I think we would all agree that it's very hard. It's like trying to pull yourself up with your own shoelaces. It's hard to do if you've got somebody that you can trust and has huge confidentiality, and at senior levels, an internal coach is not going to work. You need somebody is outside of the culture. Then you've got the best chance of transforming. And it may be a different coach at a different time in your life, but you find that the people who go furthest and do best always have had coaches for the critical times in their lives.
And I think as well in not just one-to-one coaching, but group coaching too. So if you're in an organization where you already know you've got issues with your culture, then get a group of leaders together that really want to tackle this and go together and have go through a coaching program. It's not necessarily skills building like a training course. It's more than coaching, coach through it and kind of figure out, support each other, challenge each other to move forward and get the culture back where it needs to be to support the growth and the stability or whatever of the organization.
Fantastic stuff. We are live on the Ad-Based Radio Show, brought to you by the People and Culture Association, or the PCA. If you want to join us and become a member at the PCA, drop in a line to info@peopleprofessionals.org. That is going to be on your screen very soon, and you can join us, of course, as a member pro there. I'm hearing some fantastic already insights from all of you. I'm hearing courage, curiosity, comfort, creating that psychological safe space. I'm hearing taking responsibility. I'm hearing be more reflective in practice as a leader. Sit down, think about what's going on. I'm wondering, because I come from a space where I like doing this. Sometimes I can't do it every day, but I try to do this at least every week, if not every day, at least twice every week, where I just sit down and reflect on the last 3 days or the last 2 days and the last 1 day. I'm wondering whether this is something that you would suggest to leaders. How can they do this? Because leaders have sometimes 15, 20 calls a day, maybe even more. I'm just being on the lower scale here. How do they actually sit down before they crash onto bed at night, before they go to get some nice shut-eye? How do they find that time to say, I'm just going to sit back and I'm just going to think about what did I do the whole day? Because I think that gives you that chance, right? That gives you that chance to say, oh, that call at 12 o'clock, I didn't mean to be actually be that harsh or rude to somebody. I mean, I'm not sure how I was perceived when I said that. So I'm just wondering whether there's any value in doing that. Of course, this coaching and training and mentoring is fantastic, but it has to start with the person.
But reflection is really important. The problem is we do that anyway. All of us do that. But often it's not very productive because we think, oh, why did I do that? And why didn't I do this? We need to really, there's a positive psychology exercise, which is the three best things, what went well today? What can I tell about what I was doing? How can I do more of that? And it's not pretending the bad stuff didn't happen, but it's learning as well from those errors. Yeah, that didn't go so well. What might I try differently? Now, if you're doing that and that's in the culture and everybody is trying to work that way, then even mistakes are useful learning opportunities. So it can only take, it needs to take maybe a few moments even to get really good insights, but always look at what did I do well and how can I build on that?
Yeah, I really like that. So I think, there is a difference between just reflecting and just, going through what actually happened, and intentional reflecting, so that you can actually be really, really intentional. Why am I reflecting? What am I reflecting for? What am I going to use this for? And then how am I going to put it into a bigger picture of my leadership? So intentional reflection is extremely important. Yeah.
Awesome. I want to wrap this up with one quick question to all those leaders who are either being ignorant or ignoring. Ladies, what's your cue to them? What's your last advice to them? If they're either being blindsided or basically, blindfolded, what is your answer to them? What is that final piece of advice you want to give to leaders? Because I don't think it's an excuse anymore to say, "Oh, I did not know that was happening."
Yeah.
So,
I would just ask them, what are you scared of?
Yeah.
okay.
Because ignorance is coming from the fear. And so just to be really honest to yourself and it's okay, just there is a fear. What are you scared of? What you don't want to see? And just find somebody who can help you and hold that space for you as a coach.
And I have actually asked a client, how can you bear to be so ignorant in this situation? Now, we had a lot of trust before I did that. And this person, one of their big strengths was a love of learning. How can you bear to be so ignorant about people? And he actually thought he had to like people and hug them and do things that I didn't want to do. He's much more intellectual than that. Go and research people, test your responses, but don't continue to be ignorant.
I think that what's coming through my head is much less polite and probably slightly flippant, but it's screaming at me to say, so I'm going to say it, is wake up and smell the coffee.
Absolutely. Thank you for waking us up. It's been a fantastic Thursday. Thank you, Avril. Thank you, Michaela. Thanks, Jeanette. It's been a fantastic conversation talking about leadership and toxic workplaces. And all of us on this call are very clearly saying that ignorance is not bliss. Get up there, go find out what's happening. If you think everything is all right and you're doing well, maybe it's not. So go find out if there is anything that is not working out. For those of you who have joined us live on LinkedIn and YouTube, thank you very much. Thanks, Danny, and I think Simon, and as well Thompson, who put out some nice comments for us to give us a few cues to kind of keep going with this conversation. If you are not following Michaela, Avril, and Jeanette yet on LinkedIn, I suggest you go and do that now, because they are doing some fantastic work and you should be following their journeys because they are immensely contributing to the people and culture space. Once again, ladies, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us on the Ad Based Radio Show.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Thank you, ladies. Bye.
Bye.